Hey there. So, this vibe's kind of funny. Like, the way that it's kind of like presenting to me is almost like a little story metaphor of like someone who is trying to plan the perfect outing, like this nice little picnic by the river, and, maybe take someone else there. And then, they show up and everything's going great until you realize there's a bunch of ants there. Like you put your picnic blanket down right on top of an anthill, and that kind of like disrupts the whole experience. And like I'm kind of seeing someone like freaking out a little bit, like, oh my god, I thought that I planned this well. I didn't expect to run into this. Now everything's ruined. And I get the feeling, and we've got some cards here related to that. This may have to do with the situation in regards to love. So we're gonna read the vibes with our cards here. Kind of see what the intended picnic was. What are these disruptions, these ants, so to speak, and what does spirit have to say about that? So up top, we've got the Six of Wands, the Five of Swords, and the Ten of Cups. So I think like this is your picnic, so to speak. This is like what you wanted, which is, I think, a future with someone who you care a lot about, like have a lot of strong feelings of, like not just attraction, but like wanting to really make things work in the long run. And I think like the thing that kind of came in between, our victory and our happily ever after, the ants that kind of got problematic there, is this like Five of Swords, which feels like a little bit of, I think, like this almost as like a being afraid, so afraid that you're gonna lose that you end up kind of taking the loss prematurely, and maybe either I think with this may be someone who felt like they had to kind of have all of the cards in their hand in order to feel secure, and ended up kind of like losing out. Because if you look at the imagery of this card, you see like one person who has all of the swords, and then two people are just walking away. And so I think that in this situation, like you may have kind of like let your fears, your anxieties, your ego, whatever that is, kind of get the better of you. And I think been a little rigid in the way that you handled things. A little bit like my way or the highway. And I think that kind of like felt like it drove that person off. And I think like the anxiety here is now this like, oh my god, is this over? Like I didn't want it to play out this way. But it was kind of like that anthill in this case was maybe some unhealed parts of yourself that you didn't realize that this little dream image that you had was going to end up right on top of, that was going to kind of like trigger these parts of you that were like willing to like stand between you and what you really want. Um and I think ultimately like that's a bit of a protective measure. um and spirit doesn't want you to be too hard on yourself. Like you don't need to be too hard on yourself. But I think that what we have underneath is kind of like the outcome of this. Like, what happens after our picnic is disrupted because we sat on an anthill. And we got the Nine of Wands, the Ace of Cups, and the Seven of Cups. And I think that like this is saying that it's not quite as bad as you think. Um, I think that there is gonna have to be a little bit of you kind of like holding out a little longer for what you really want, if this is what you really want. And I think like reevaluating, I think a lot of the paths that took you to this point because you may not have been like fully aware, I think, of all of the insecurities and almost like how far those wounded parts were willing to go to like protect you from being hurt in the way that you were before. And so I think with this like Seven of Cups with the Nine of Wands, it is a lot of sticking it out, I think, as you work through these kinds of like different possible ways to approach your own energy. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is kind of this like Ace of Cups in the middle, where if we're going back to that picnic metaphor, it's kind of like you may feel like I ruined the picnic. Maybe I wanted this to be a cute little romantic date, perfect thing, but kind of seeing the way that I handled this situation, that this other person handled this situation, like seeing the differences in the way that those different people like responded, I think may honestly be inspiring some new situations, I guess new feelings about the situation. And I don't think that that's necessarily like in a bad way, but I am a little curious. I want to know a little bit more about this like Ace of Cups that seems to kind of like developed in relation to this situation being less than ideal. Ace of Pentacles, the Magician, Queen of Wands. I think that like something about the way that this person like responded, it's like giving there's, no one else I would rather have, a ruin picnic with. Like somehow even in that situation that was less than ideal, even in that situation where I think that you may have felt like triggered, or like you didn't fully think ahead or account for all of these things, it really only like strengthened and intensified your feelings about this situation. I think it almost like made it more real with this like Ace of Pentacles and Queen of Wands, as like seeing this as someone who you can overcome a lot of things with, and like someone who shows up as like, I think, still like really passionate and magnetic, and fun to be around. The Queen of Wands, she's like a very lively energy. She can be the center of attention, the life of a party. You know, it's like making even a less than ideal situation feel fun, feel full of life and full of passion. And I think like that's like causing this shift, this Ace of Cups, where I think that you honestly feel more strongly about this situation, and can like more clearly see, I think, especially with this Magician and Ace of Pentacles, like what you want this to look like in the future. Not just what you want it to feel like, not just how you want it to end, but like more like concrete steps about what you want to build with this person. And I think with that Magician, there's almost like a little more inspiration to take action. And I like that. I like that because the things that really matter to us and the things that we hold close to our heart and the things that are, kind of inspired by spirit, those are things that, there are actionable paths towards, and they allow us to step more into our power. But I am kind of seeing you as someone who's now showing up like this, like wanting to really actually, like I said, take action to create and manifest this life, this future, this new path with this person who I think has seen you through some less than ideal circumstances. So I'd like to know a little bit about like how this person sees you, because I think that we kind of can see how you're seeing this person. Okay, we've got the Eight of Wands, the Ten of Swords, Four of Swords, Queen of Cups, King of Pentacles, Four of Pentacles, this upright or reversed. It's upright, but it's teetering. I think that, like, they may be coming to some conclusions of their own. And this does feel a lot like there's been some energetic resets, because we now have 3 out of 4 aces on the table, which is all about new beginnings. But we also, for this person's perspective, like, we have the Ten of Swords, which is, you know, kind of the culmination of the Suit of Swords. It's also a lot of, you know, failure. It's loss, it's collapse, it's defeat. And I think, like, that goes along with what I was saying with this person kind of having seen you at the beginning, at the end, seeing you winning, and also seeing you kind of struggling with that. And I think that there's something here about, like, I think them working through and, you know, almost like observing the way that you handle defeat. Because this first row here, for their perception of you, kind of feels like it's telling a similar story, where, you know, it's like all of this energy kind of like came in at once, and maybe you didn't really plan for it. You know, you were not expecting ants, and there was kind of a breakdown of what you expected things to be. You know, you didn't really get, like, that picture perfect moment ending. And, you know, and they kind of watched you pull back and, like, you know, have to recover from that. But I think that, like, there's something important about the way that you are showing up, like, as you are recovering, and even, like, as you're failing here, you know, like, I don't want to put it that way, but, like, I think noticing how you handle defeat, how you move through that. I do like, in this Ten of Swords picture, we literally see the swords, like, you know, stabbed down into, like, a blanket there, which, you know, it's kind of reminding me of, you know, like, someone running away from, like, picnic blanket full of ants there, which, again, I think that's kind of confirmation that the issue here, I think, was in a lot of, like, mental patterns and past trauma, and, like, these cycles. It was, you know, something that is, like, very, I don't want to say it's, like, all in your head, because, you know, I think that there are legitimate reasons for you to feel the way that you do, and I think that there was, you know, also a lot of energy kind of coming in this situation that was sort of, like, triggering those past wounds, and I think that you've been doing a lot of, like, recovery and integration, and this person's kind of been, like, observing that and observing the truth of that. And I think, like, seeing you come into a state of greater emotional balance and, like, groundedness with this Queen of Cups and King of Pentacles. And I think that, like, with this Four of Pentacles over here, you know, there may have been times when you were kind of, like, barely holding on to the stability that you had, but you didn't, like, fully let go of that. Like, no matter how triggering the situation was, or how much you felt like, you know, it didn't necessarily play out the way that you wanted it to, you know, I think that there's definitely something here about, like, you learning to master a lot of your emotions, and stay, like, balanced within that. And also, I think that being reflected in you coming out of this situation as someone who's, the word that's is, like, coming to mind is, like, more generous, and I think also more forgiving. Because I think that, you know, before, I don't see you as, you know, showing up as a huge asshole, but, you know, maybe being the person who's like, okay, you know, how hard can it be? You know, you plan a picnic, you get a picnic blanket and a basket. It's not that hard, you know, just put the things together, do that, you know, and now, like, kind of realizing, like, okay, you know, there can be a lot of reasons that things go wrong, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault, but, you know, it is something that we want to be aware of. And I think that you're trying your best to, like, learn from this, you know, and, like, okay, next time I go out, I'm gonna I'm gonna look around and, make sure that this is actually a good spot to be putting down my picnic blanket. There's no anthills or whatever. Which in this metaphor would be, kind of like checking your own ego, checking when you start to feel triggered or you start to feel emotionally overwhelmed, that you're not just kind of like reverting back to old patterns of, you know, a little bit of like black and white thinking, and kind of like sabotaging yourself with some of that. And I think that there's, with this Ace of Swords kind of like wavering, I think that they are a little bit like watching and seeing how you react. And I think that like the way that you respond and the way that you approach this person definitely has an impact on, how they're willing to receive it. So I'd like to know from Spirit, what's the advice in this situation? What can you do that is helpful, not helpful, anything like that? Okay. So we've got the Hierophant, the Six of Pentacles, the Four of Wands, Two of Wands, and Queen of Swords. So, again, like I was talking about, you kind of coming through this as someone who's more grounded, more generous, more directed with like what you want and how to get it. I think like that's something that is really important here. And I think that's something that you're already doing, but you don't necessarily have to be afraid to show up in that energy. I think that that's something that this person actually finds like very reassuring and attractive. Is like seeing how you are evolving and growing on your own path. And I think also like seeing that there's like stability there in the long term. And this, doesn't mean that you have to come like right out the gate with, a marriage proposal. Like I think that would honestly read in some cases as, a little unstable if there's not like the proper foundation for that. But with like the Four of Wands and the Hierophant, like the Hierophant is long-term commitment. Four of Wands is like celebration. These two cards together, like they are giving life partnership, marriage, heavy commitment in a really good way. And so I think that there is something here, I think, about you approaching this situation with, a level of consideration and like seriousness that is reflective of how you really feel. And being willing to like share that with this person, even if that's just like your vision for the future with this Two of Wands. And I think like it is important in this situation to have that like long-term vision, as something that like you really want to move towards. And like I think like hold that long-term vision and that commitment, and allow this person to see how that is reflected in your actions, in your words, and also in your boundaries. Because we also got this Queen of Swords here. And I'm seeing this as you kind of like gaining mastery, I think, over those like mental frameworks and those mindsets and those thoughts, traumas, triggers, with the Five of Swords here that originally tripped you up, and kind of like becoming a master of that, and like being able to not be overwhelmed by that energy to the point that it kind of like takes you off track, but rather feeling like you can work around that you have the understanding, and like the clear-headedness to kind of strategize and create plans, boundaries, conversations that allow you to avoid that kind of situation in the future, that allow you to like navigate that. And I think like that's part of this like commitment to long-term stability, and this commitment to giving others what they need as well. And I think that like you are someone who cares a lot about whatever situation this is. And I think that, there may have been a part of you before that was kind of caught in this like all or nothing thinking. Like if this one situation doesn't work out, might as well all be a bust. Like might as well, I'm either the winner or the loser. Either this is all going to be great or it's not. And I think that you have like a lot more nuance here about giving and receiving and working kind of as a team, and that being something that is worth celebrating, and that's something that's worth investing in, and that's something that's worth working towards. And I think that like when you start to really like shift your mind in that direction, you're gonna find that I think that there's like a lot more that you can do to kind of encourage and preserve and cultivate that energy moving forward. And I think like that's really like the best thing that you could do in this situation, because I think that really shows that you're like putting your money where your mouth is. Because I think that for this person, with their perception first coming out as this Ace of Swords, a little upright, a little reversed, it is really important to them. I think that there is clarity, and that there is truth, and that there is consistency. So I think that like the more that you do that, like the more that this is going to play out in a positive way. I want to know what else is there. So we've got the Seven of Swords, the Six of Cups, Knight of Pentacles, Queen of Pentacles, Hanged Man. Okay, so this is a bit of an aside, but I think that it's like relevant to the energy of the current situation. Because like the Six of Cups here, that's all about like past situations, past energy, maybe nostalgia. With the Seven of Swords here, I think that there was a situation in your past where you were kind of misled about how that was going to end. And this might be related to this situation where I was kind of talking about like past triggers and things, giving you a little bit of all or nothing thinking, like, if this isn't going to work out, I might as well be the one holding the swords or whatever. And I think like in the past, the way that this like appeared to be, this past situation, I'm seeing you show up as this like Knight of Pentacles, and someone else kind of appearing as this Queen of Pentacles, where you were like, okay, if I work diligently, if I put in the effort, it's going to be reciprocated. There's going to be this safe place for me to be nurtured and seen and appreciated. But I think that what really happened was that it left you kind of turned upside down. It left you, I think, like bearing the brunt of whatever negative consequences came about. It left you without a lot of options. And I think that's maybe why you now resort to being, the person that is like, okay, I need to like at least make sure that I'm keeping my options open. I need to make sure that I'm, in control here. I think that there is something about like control, and this feeling of trusting people requiring you to give up some amount of control. And I think that, this, like what they're telling me is that like the way that the situation in the past with this other person presented, I think that, you almost looked at it as through a little bit of like rose-colored glasses, I think, as far as the whole situation, without acknowledging the fact that there was like this deception involved. You were kind of misled about what you were supposed to do, how you were supposed to show up, and what the end result of that would be. And like I don't think anyone will hold it against you for, having been in that situation and having put that trust there. But I think you need to remember, like, it wasn't like the, act of caring about another person or like wanting what you wanted, maybe what you've always wanted out of relationships that got you to this point. It was the fact that you were lied to about, what was needed in this situation or what you could expect. because, I kind of feel like this, when I see the Six of Cups, it kind of reminds me of the imagery of the Ten of Cups, where we've got, like these two cats kind of chilling together. We have the cups out in front. We have this, very picturesque, homey kind of scene. And so I think that this may have been, a situation where you were a bit, vulnerable about like putting in the work and showing up for something that you care about, only to end up in this position, kind of like strung up and feeling a little bit used. And I think the reason why they want me to mention this as kind of like an aside is to acknowledge, like, first of all, that like that was real, and also like that was deceptive and that was hurtful. And you don't have to downplay that, and you don't have to take accountability for that in order to take accountability for what you want now and how you're showing up now. Like those are two different things, and they do kind of intersect and influence each other, but I think that it feels like different energy. This feels like very shifty, very false start. Um it's a different vibe. And I think that just because you kind of have a similar image as far as, maybe what you want out of a relationship, what you want out of, your future, it doesn't mean that the people are going to behave the same way, and maybe someone needs that reminder. I would love to grab just a couple cards on the immediate and or long-term outcome for this current situation, so you can maybe see how this is different. So we've got the Seven of Wands, the World, the Ace of Wands, and the Knight of Swords, and King of Swords here. So I think, like with this Knight of Swords and King of Swords, this is already like a much more honest connection. A much more honest connection. And I think it is a connection with this World showing up right after the Seven of Wands. Like, I think that this is something that is going to allow you to let down your guard a little bit. It's going to be like a fulfillment of this cycle where you felt like you were doing it alone, where you felt like you always had to have your guard up. You always had to be looking out for yourself because everyone was going to screw you over. And there's all these people against you, and you're just on your own there. It's very different energy, like I'm kind of seeing like both of you showing up in both of these energies, like both being articulate and discerning and grounded with truth, and also like being willing to communicate that, being willing to take action, being willing to make the changes that are necessary. And I think that a lot of that's going to come from like the completion of this cycle that has you, very, very isolated, and I think very, very much feeling like you're always having to defend your boundaries. You're always having to explain yourself. You're always having to work really hard for like any amount of like advantage or anything that you could get. It's going to feel a lot more like harmony. And I think that as you're not fighting so much, like there's going to be more energy with this Ace of Wands to like almost like put towards other things, put towards actually understanding your truth, towards communicating, towards collaborating, towards, I'm seeing it as, again, like I said, like kind of switching things up. Like sometimes you're the King of Swords, you're the one who's kind of like calling the shots, who's has the bigger perspective on the truth, and this other person is kind of helping you put that into action. And I think sometimes they're going to be the one who's able to see and communicate things that you aren't, who is having like, the greater level of, I think, understanding and authority on the topic. And you're the one who's like, okay, let's make this happen. What needs to happen, what needs to be said, what needs to be defended. And working more as like a team there, where you both respect yourselves, as opposed to before, where we got the Queen of Pentacles and the Knight of Pentacles. But I was really seeing that as like you being put in one role, which is that like knight role. And if we're talking about knights and queens, like the knights kind of just serve the queen, you know? And I don't see this as being something where either of you is like perpetually in like a subservient role. Like, you know, one of you just sees yourself as the king and the other one is there to do their bidding. It feels very much like people who have enough, both like humility and understanding and mastery of their own energy, that they can take on whatever role the situation needs. And I think like seeing someone who is both willing to stand in their power, um, and also like respect you when you stand in yours, and respect the areas in which you have that greater understanding, that greater expertise. Like that's kind of like what brings it full circle, what allows you to come out of defensive mode, what allows you to feel new sparks and feel inspired and passionate in ways that you hadn't before, which I think that that's absolutely lovely. And I think it's a hard-earned victory, but definitely something that has been a long time coming. And I think that you really want this, so like don't hold yourself back or beat yourself up too much, as far as moving towards this and being honest and sincere about what this means to you, and you know what you want to do in order to make that happen. So good luck.